The monitor beeped steadily in the quiet room as Dr. James Mitchell paused in the doorway, struck by the sight of the elderly woman sitting alone by the window. No flowers adorned her bedside table. No cards lined her windowsill. No visitors had signed the check-in sheet for room 317 in over 2 weeks. What he discovered in the next few minutes would not only change her life, but would completely transform his own. If you've ever wondered whether small acts of kindness can truly make a difference, this story will show you just how powerful compassion can be. If this story touches your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the difference one person can make. James hadn't planned to enter room 317 that evening. His shift had ended 30 minutes ago, and his wife had texted twice about dinner plans. But something about the solitary figure silhouetted against the fading sunset made him pause. Perhaps it was the slight tremor in her shoulders, or the way she clutched a worn photograph to her chest. Whatever it was, James found himself walking into the room instead of toward the elevator. "Good evening, Mrs. Collins," he said, checking the name on the door. "I'm Dr. Mitchell. I'm just doing some final rounds before heading home." Eleanor Collins turned slowly, hastily wiping away tears with the edge of her blanket. "Oh, hello, Doctor. I don't believe we've met before." James smiled gently. "I normally work in the cardiac unit, but I'm covering for Dr. Patel this week." He moved closer, noticing the photograph she still held. "Is that your family?" Eleanor hesitated before turning the photo toward him. It showed a much younger version of herself alongside a handsome man and a teenage girl, all smiling brightly against a backdrop of mountains. "My husband Robert and our daughter Sarah. This was taken at Yellowstone, 27 years ago." "That's a beautiful memory," James said, pulling up a chair. He knew he should leave. His shift was over, paperwork waited, his wife expected him, but something in Eleanor's eyes held him there. "Robert passed away 5 years ago," Eleanor said softly. "Heart attack. It was quick," they said. "He didn't suffer." Her fingers traced her husband's face in the photograph. "And Sarah, well, Sarah lives in Australia now. Has for 15 years. She has her own family, her own life." James nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. "And they can't visit?" "Sarah came when I first had the stroke 3 weeks ago. Stayed for 4 days. But she has 3 children, a demanding job." Eleanor's voice trailed off. "It's a long way to travel." "And other family? Friends?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "We moved to this city after retirement. Robert wanted to be near the ocean. Our friends are scattered across the country now. Some have passed. Others are dealing with their own health issues." She shrugged. "That's what happens when you get old, Doctor. Your world shrinks." James felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with medical concerns. In his 10 years as a physician, he'd seen countless patients, but something about Eleanor's quiet dignity in the face of such profound loneliness struck him deeply. "What about you, Doctor? You have family waiting, I imagine?" Eleanor asked, clearly trying to shift attention away from herself. "My wife, Melissa," James admitted. "And a golden retriever named Einstein who thinks he's human." Eleanor laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "I always wanted a dog. Robert was allergic." James found himself sharing stories about Einstein's antics, delighting in the way Eleanor's eyes brightened. Before he realized it, 45 minutes had passed. His phone buzzed with another text from Melissa. "I should go," he said reluctantly. Eleanor nodded. "Of course. Thank you for stopping by, Dr. Mitchell. It's been nice to talk to someone." The simple statement hit James like a physical blow. As he stood to leave, he made a split-second decision. "Mrs. Collins, Eleanor, would it be all right if I stopped by again tomorrow? Maybe during my lunch break?" The hope that flashed across her face was answer enough. That night, James couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor. Over dinner, he told Melissa about the lonely woman in room 317. "It just doesn't seem right," he said, pushing food around his plate. "She's recovering from a stroke, and she's completely alone." Melissa reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "So what are you going to do about it?" The question caught him off guard. "Do? I'm not sure there's much I can do beyond visiting when I have time." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "James Mitchell, I've known you for 15 years. You've never been the type to see a problem and walk away." She was right, of course. By the time they went to bed, James had the beginnings of a plan. The next day, James brought lunch to share with Eleanor, homemade chicken soup that Melissa had prepared that morning. As they ate, he learned more about Eleanor's life. She had been an English teacher for 35 years. She and Robert had traveled extensively after retirement. She loved mystery novels and classical music. "Sarah sends emails," Eleanor said, answering his unasked question. "And we video chat once a month. She's busy, but she tries." James nodded, hearing the mixture of love and longing in Eleanor's voice. "Tell me about her." Eleanor's face lit up as she described her daughter's work as a marine biologist, her 3 grandchildren, the life Sarah had built on the other side of the world. "I'm proud of her," Eleanor said firmly. "I miss her terribly, but I'm proud." Over the next few days, James made it a point to visit Eleanor daily. Sometimes for just a few minutes, sometimes longer. He brought books from his own collection when he discovered they shared a love for mystery novels. He introduced her to podcasts on his tablet, setting up an account for her. A week into these visits, James arrived to find Eleanor in tears. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Are you in pain? Should I call a nurse?" Eleanor shook her head, unable to speak through her sobs. Finally, she pointed to her phone on the bedside table. "Sarah called. She can't come for my discharge next week. Her youngest has come down with pneumonia." James sat beside her, offering silent support as she cried. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Eleanor finally whispered. "The social worker says I need someone to help me at home for at least the first few weeks. I can't afford a full-time nurse." "I thought Sarah, but I understand. Her child needs her." James felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He'd seen this scenario play out too many times, elderly patients with no support system, forced into rehabilitation facilities or nursing homes because they couldn't safely return to their homes alone. "Let me think about this," he said. "There might be options we haven't considered." That evening, James and Melissa had a long conversation. By morning, they had made a decision that would change all their lives. "We have the guest room," James told Eleanor the next day. "It's on the first floor, with its own bathroom. Melissa works from home 3 days a week. Between the two of us, we could help you through those first critical weeks." Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious. You barely know me." "I know enough," James said simply. "I know you're kind and intelligent. I know you love mystery novels and hate hospital food. I know you taught English for 35 years and still correct my grammar when I slip up." Eleanor laughed despite herself. "Most importantly," James continued, "I know that if our situations were reversed, you would do the same for me." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different from the ones he'd witnessed the day before. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" James considered the question carefully. "Because we're not really strangers anymore, are we? And because sometimes, the family we need isn't the one we're born into." 2 days later, Melissa visited the hospital, bringing Einstein along, against hospital regulations, but with the tacit approval of the nursing staff. The golden retriever immediately took to Eleanor, resting his head on her lap as if he'd known her forever. He's a good judge of character, Melissa said, watching the interaction with a smile. Eleanor stroked Einstein's soft fur, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to thank you both. You don't need to, Melissa assured her. James told me you make excellent apple pie. That's payment enough. The day of Eleanor's discharge arrived with a flurry of activity. James and Melissa had prepared the guest room, installing grab bars in the bathroom and a ramp over the 2 steps leading to their front door. They'd arranged for Eleanor's mail to be forwarded and for her apartment to be checked regularly. As James helped Eleanor into the wheelchair that would take her to their car, she clutched his hand. You've changed everything, she whispered. I was so afraid. Not anymore, James promised. Not anymore. The transition wasn't without challenges. Eleanor struggled with the physical therapy exercises. She grew frustrated with her limitations. There were nights when James and Melissa heard her crying softly in her room, homesick for her own space, missing Robert, longing for Sarah. But there were beautiful moments too. Eleanor teaching Melissa how to make her famous apple pie. Einstein curling up beside Eleanor during afternoon naps. The 3 of them watching old movies together, Eleanor providing commentary on the classic films she'd loved for decades. 2 weeks stretched into a month. Eleanor grew stronger. She began taking short walks around the neighborhood with Einstein, her cane in one hand, the dog's leash in the other. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Eleanor turned to James. I think it's time for me to go home. James felt an unexpected pang of sadness. Are you sure? You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Eleanor smiled. I know. And that's precisely why I need to go. Because you've given me back my confidence. My independence. James nodded, understanding. We'll help you get settled. And we'll check on you regularly. I'd like that, Eleanor said. And perhaps you could bring Einstein for visits? Try and stop him, James laughed. He's grown quite attached to you. The day they helped Eleanor move back to her apartment, Sarah called on video chat. James watched as Eleanor proudly showed her daughter around, demonstrating how she could now navigate her space safely, explaining the modifications James had helped arrange. Mom, you look amazing, Sarah said, her voice tinged with relief and something like wonder. When I saw you in the hospital, I was so worried. I had good care, Eleanor said, winking at James off camera. The best. After the call ended, Eleanor turned to James and Melissa. Sarah's planning to visit at Christmas. With the children. She says she can stay for 2 weeks. That's wonderful. Melissa exclaimed. Yes, Eleanor agreed. And I was hoping, would you join us for Christmas dinner? All of you, including Einstein. Sarah wants to meet the people who took such good care of her mother. James felt his throat tighten with emotion. We'd be honored. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor pressed something into James's hand. It was the photograph he'd first seen her holding in the hospital, Robert, Eleanor, and Sarah at Yellowstone. I want you to have this, she said. James shook his head. I couldn't. This is your precious memory. And now it's part of a new one, Eleanor insisted. The day a busy doctor took the time to notice a lonely old woman, and in doing so, gave her back her life. In the months that followed, Eleanor became a regular part of James and Melissa's lives. Sunday dinners. Movie nights. She joined their book club and quickly became the group's most insightful member. When Sarah visited at Christmas, the 2 families celebrated together, forging connections that would last for years. 2 years later, when James and Melissa welcomed their first child, a daughter, they named her Eleanor. And when little Ellie took her first steps, it was toward the arms of her honorary grandmother, who watched with tears of joy streaming down her face. James often thought back to that evening in the hospital, when he'd paused at the door of room 317. How close he'd come to walking past. How easily he might have missed the connection that had enriched all their lives so profoundly. Sometimes the most significant moments in our lives hinge on the smallest decisions. A moment of noticing. A choice to engage rather than turn away. A willingness to see the humanity in a stranger. Eleanor had once asked why he'd stopped to talk to her that evening. At the time, he hadn't had a clear answer. But now he understood. In her loneliness, he had recognized a universal truth, that we all need connection. That we all fear being forgotten. That sometimes, the greatest gift we can give another person is simply our presence. In a world that often moves too quickly, that values productivity over compassion, that can make even the most accomplished people feel invisible as they age, James had made a different choice. And that choice had created ripples that continued to spread, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. Eleanor's tears in that hospital room had indeed changed everything. They had reminded him of what truly matters. They had brought him back to the reason he'd become a doctor in the first place, not just to heal bodies, but to care for people. Whole people, with histories and fears and hopes and dreams. As he watched Eleanor reading a story to little Ellie, her voice animated and her eyes bright, James knew with absolute certainty that the family we create through choice and love can be every bit as meaningful as the one we're born into. Sometimes even more so. And in that knowledge was a profound lesson, one he hoped others might learn without having to stumble upon it by chance, that no one should have to face life's challenges alone. That we all have the power to transform loneliness into connection. That sometimes, the most important thing we can do is simply stop, notice, and care.